I think it's after 5, right? Well, hello, colleagues. I think our other team members are going to be rolling in shortly, I hope, but it is a little after 5 here, and that is when this meeting is scheduled. So I'm going to officially call to order the Kalamazoo City Commission Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, February 2nd, 2026. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hess.
Present.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Pradle. Commissioner Slaby. Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Duncan.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here.
And Commissioner Pradle.
May I please have a motion to excuse Commissioner Slaby?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Hess,
Second.
supported by Vice Mayor Duncan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Commissioner Hoffman, thank you. There we go. Get me on track here. All right. Motion passed, correct? All right. Next, communications. Manager Hankins.
Not at this time.
All right. Now is the opportunity for public comments. Just a reminder, public comments for the Committee of the Whole are 2 minutes, correct? And can be on any topic of your choosing, not an opportunity for dialogue, but an opportunity to provide a comment to the Commission and for the public. Is there anyone who wants to take advantage of the public comment time for the Committee of the Whole meeting? Yes.
Greetings. My name is Keith Platting, and I want to thank the Commission for providing this opportunity. I want to introduce myself and my team. We are Edison Initiatives, and we are about bringing hope and transformation to residents of the Edison neighborhood. I'd like to read a statement, and then others would also share portions of the same. Thank you for consideration and interest in our work in the Edison neighborhood. We represent the Edison Initiatives nonprofit organization. We truly appreciate the efforts of the 4 commissioners that were able to at different times to come and view our current house, our project at 1109 Hayes Park Street on Dr. Martin Luther King Day. With all the other commitments that you had, you made space for that day. We thank you for that. We recognize the sacrifice that it took. Your enthusiasm and suggestions for the help on our project were truly encouraging. Other commissioners have an open invitation to see the project in process. You're welcome to come at any time. We'd like to request the consideration of discretionary funds the commission that has available to them to improve the community, and would like to present our project as a way to help achieve your goals. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak about Edison Initiatives. In your email this morning, this presentation was shared with you, as well as some media files to help support our request. Edison Initiatives is a nonprofit L3C made up entirely of volunteers that work to bring about transformation and empowerment to the Edison neighborhood. We desire to increase the number of owner-occupied single-family homes in Edison by helping more people become homeowners, people that wouldn't otherwise be able to own a home, those who are underrepresented, those who are not.
Thank you. That is your 2 minutes.
Good evening, Toby Hannah Davies, city resident. I just want to tell you the interview was really, really well done for the home sharing focus groups. I'm so pleased. I was just going to tell your staff how happy I was, but I decided you should all know that the feasibility study agency the city hired did a really good job interviewing me about my home sharing experience and my recommendations for other people who should be interviewed, and what I see as the benefits and potential obstacles that we need to have staff to support home sharers and home seekers to find a match in the first place and then to have a successful experience together. I'm very pleased, and I'm really looking forward to the home sharing launch later this year. I think, to me, it's a slam dunk because it's a way of providing affordable housing without a single dollar for new construction, or even probably many dollars for any kind of renovation. So thank you for such a good company.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Commissioners. My name is Anna Herron, and I volunteer on the leadership team along with 11 others for Edison Initiatives. I am a local realtor and a fellow citizen who seeks to ensure that every resident of our great city has a chance to be a homeowner. Our program's objective is to communicate love, value, and worth to individuals stuck in the cycle of renting by helping them to become first-time home buyers. Many of these individuals come from families where homeownership has not been accessible for generations, and these are individuals who fit the ALICE definition, which is asset limited income constrained employed. These families have not had the benefit of generational wealth or a history of homeownership in their family. We don't have to tell you that we're in the midst of a housing crisis that affects so many families, and they need an opportunity to not just survive, but to flourish. We're trying to help with that and end the cycle of renting for these wonderful people and citizens. What we do, our process, is that we select and purchase a house within the Edison neighborhood. Our renovation team then rehabs the house, and our quality benchmark is we generally ask ourselves, is this to the standard that we would renovate our own home? And then we have a candidate selection team that selects a potential homeowner for the lease-to-own program that we offer. Within that time frame, our equipping team helps this candidate achieve homeownership readiness, and we provide wraparound support services, which includes budgeting, coaching, helping to repair their credit, and to be a listening ear and help with any other challenges that the individual or family might be facing. The candidate leases from us for up to 5 years in preparation for purchase, and then they qualify and they're ready to close with a standard mortgage within 5 years. We provide significant funding from past lease payments to the candidate that they've already paid to us towards their home purchase, which is an up to.
Thank you. Next, please.
Thank you very much. My name is David Davis. I am also a volunteer with Edison Initiatives. What's unique about us? We are diverse as a leadership group. We are grassroots. We are all volunteers. We are not paid employees. We have no overhead. 100% of the funds we raise goes to help the future homeowners and improve the value of their property and the housing stock in the Edison neighborhood. We work with many different churches, businesses, and community organizations, both as funders, partners, and volunteers. We require each one of our candidates to complete the home repair program at Community Homeworks. We require each one of our candidates to also complete home ownership training at KNHS. Each candidate must complete a budgeting course of their choice. We have volunteers from churches around Kalamazoo, the community coming together to help a family experience the dream and the benefits of home ownership, changing lives and changing generations. Here's our current need. Our current project, our third house, is at 1109 Hayes Park. We are excited that several of you have had a chance to walk through and see the property. We seek to be a change agent and a pillar of transformation just east of Ray Street on Hayes Park. Hayes Park can be tough, but it's improving. We seek to be an anchor on that street for the continued stability and improvement. We have seen it in our previous houses. When we improve a home on the street, our owners improve their properties. There is a ripple effect that goes beyond just the home we are working on. We also know the more we invest in our deteriorating core neighborhoods, even one house at a time, the more that helps stabilize and grow our housing stock and our tax base.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name's Sherry Davis. I'm reading for another board member. My name is Talanja Steele. I'm a member of the Edison Initiatives leadership team. I lead the candidate selection team. My husband and I are homeowners on the Washington Avenue in the Edison neighborhood. We own the home because I completed a program exactly like this, and it's called Kingdom Housing. That was run by Keith E. Baby. When he was at Urban Alliance, my family and my future has been changed in large part as a result of this program. I am no longer dependent on Section 8 for rental support. I have a full-time job. I have a home to grow old in with my husband, a stable place for my family to return to. I have the pride and the self-dignity of owning my own place. I have generational wealth that I can now pass down to my 3 grown children. And now I serve on the leadership team of the Edison Initiatives, where I can help others experience the same transformation that I have experienced. I get to give back. I'm blessed to be a blessing. I've experienced firsthand what this program can do, and I want that for so many others. I see it every day, people who work hard that can't get ahead. This program provides a boost to people who are working hard and need the help. It helped me add, and I'm excited to help others. Please help support the renovations of the house on 1109 Hayes Park so we can help another family just like mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to take advantage of this public comment time? Seeing no one at this time, then the public comment period is closed for this meeting. As a reminder, there is also a public comment time during our 7 o'clock business meeting. We are now down, Manager Hankins, to the focus of our work session here today, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Sherilyn Parsons, and she will introduce today's presentation for us. Community Development Manager, sorry.
Oops. Sorry, Scott, was I moving too quickly? Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, for having us. Today, we're going to be talking about the housing corridor opportunities that we have here in the city of Kalamazoo. This is a land use and development study that we're going to be presenting. The purpose for tonight's meeting really is information and education. There's no call to action on this. This will be something that is going to be part of the Imagine Kalamazoo 2035 Master Plan. And it really is adding another tool to that city toolbox. Some of you are new on this dais, and so for those who've been here before, we talk about this city toolbox. This study is based out of empirical data that was researched and found by our presenters company, Flywheel. Ryan Kilpatrick is going to be coming up, and then it's based off of best practices that we see. This is to create development opportunities on the Housing for All spectrum. So just a reminder of the housing ecosystem that we work within. And then thinking about the city's toolbox. So some of you have seen the slide that shows the city's toolbox. Some of you, this might be your first time seeing it. The corridor housing opportunity, this really is part of the toolbox as it fits into decreasing barriers to infill and development. So it fits in that first box that we have. So as mentioned, it'll be part of the Imagine Kalamazoo Master Plan, but it really is something that begins to show our community how to reduce barriers for development. It is part of the strategy, but not all of it. So the pre-approved plans also feed into this strategy, as well as our NEZ policy. And What we are really hoping is to have a corridor policy or a corridor study that sits out there that'll open up state funding, and it will really be impactful for and as it pertains to low-income housing tax credits. So I'm going to ask Ryan right now if he'll make sure to touch on that at the end of his presentation, how this type of study can open up opportunities for those low-income housing tax credit dollars, which is the main way that we see deeply affordable units developed in our community. It is important to note when we are looking at this study that this is a land use strategy to assist with private housing development. The areas that you're going to see tonight are not areas that the city owns. The city is not leading a development in those areas. The areas that we chose are for example purposes, and they are currently privately owned. So that's why we wanted to make sure we did an informational and a discussion with you all, because once this hits the website, people might question, hey, why is my property on this? And is the city planning on doing something with my property? That is not the intent. So this is an opportunity visual to show how existing resources and infrastructure can be leveraged. It is anticipated, once again, that this will be part of the Imagine Kalamazoo 2035 Master Plan, and a study as this will serve as a catalyst to build out underutilized land in a way that can utilize existing infrastructure and resources. So, once again, it doesn't represent city-owned properties or city-led development. The city doesn't do the development itself, but we partner with those private entities that do the development. So the properties identified in this study are representatives of examples only. Also in this, it's an opportunity or a call to action by private developers to look at these areas of underutilized land and find creative opportunities to tap into the existing infrastructure and resources already available on these corridors. So just as a quick reminder, when we talk about our sort of our housing areas, we talk about 3 areas: the urban core, the urban center, and the general urban. The urban core being the downtown area, the urban center are those areas that surround the core, and then the general urban is the outlying neighborhoods. So we have a need of over 600 housing units within those areas, and that is in the city of Kalamazoo, and that is assuming the currently permitted developments continue to move forward. If anything happens with the currently permitted developments, then that need will go up. So we're looking at still about 604 units of need in the city proper. So now I'd like to introduce to you Ryan Kilpatrick to talk about what this housing corridor study looks like.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Sherilyn, and welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Happy to be here. My name is Ryan Kilpatrick. I'm the owner of Flywheel Community Development Services. I've had the pleasure to speak with you a couple of times in the past, and I'm excited to be a contributor to the City of Kalamazoo toolbox for housing affordability and supply at all price points. We have limited time and a lot to get through, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. At any point, please feel free to interrupt if you have questions. I'm also going to make sure to leave at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions before the end of the hour. But the things that we're going to cover today are implications of the status quo, sort of our business as usual approach to corridor development, how we create housing options at every price point, taxable value analysis. So under the status quo, how much tax revenue are we generating, and how could we generate more revenue by creating more options for more households? Looking at specific opportunities within the city of Kalamazoo, we've mapped a number of different corridors as well as a handful of specific sites. We'll talk about neighborhood types and then show you those example transformations that, as Sherilyn talked about, are just examples, not actually planned, but we hope that they're inspiration for local community members, property owners, and the like. So broadly, what we really like to pay attention to are the core principles of neighborhood development. And what we want to be thinking about are ensuring that we have options for everybody. And that includes households of all sizes, of all wages, and at all life stages. So really thinking about from cradle to senior citizens, we've got lots of opportunities for everybody, regardless of whether they're a single adult household or a family with 7 kids. We want to make sure that we're making smart investments that will pay dividends over the long term, not just solving today's problems, but paying it forward to future generations. We want to make sure that we're setting aside meaningful green spaces, not just requiring a little patch of turf for every family in front of their home, but having meaningful places for people to congregate, to play games, to recreate, to have passive recreation. All of those things are important, as well as access to nature and wild spaces. Creating vibrant places, those third spaces that are sometimes coffee shops, sometimes parks, sometimes civic places like libraries. Those are integral to democracy and to community building. Making sure that all of our decisions are locally driven, and sometimes that's at the city level, sometimes it's drilled down even at the neighborhood level, and that we all recognize we have shared responsibility. No single block or single neighborhood or single municipality can solve our housing challenges by itself. We've got to be thinking about this as a shared responsibility, even while our decisions are really made at the local level. So then we want to talk about theory versus reality. We started this project as a project that is nested within a broader county strategy. So Kalamazoo County asked us to look at corridors across the entire county. And then we talked with staff here at the city and they say, hey, we'd like you to pull apart some of that and really focus on the city of Kalamazoo and some of our particular corridors. And part of this work is recognizing that when we build infrastructure, it's an investment in economic development. We are building infrastructure with the expectation that people will leverage that infrastructure to create families, to create small businesses, to generate new industry. And generally what we want to see is as much of that economic activity as possible on every foot of infrastructure that we build. But oftentimes what we do is we spread that infrastructure out really far, and we don't get nearly the return on investment that we once anticipated. And so a big part of what we're going to share with you today is how to get much more return out of the infrastructure that you have while solving for local social and community responsibilities. So broadly at the county level, the Upjohn Institute has found that the county needs about 7,800 additional housing units between now and 2030, and an additional 15,000 are likely needed between now and 2050. But our status quo pattern of development generally expects that we'll continue to spread out, right? That we'll continue to build more infrastructure on the periphery and not invest in the places where we already have infrastructure. But simultaneously, what we've seen is a shortage of available housing supply. And as that shortage continues to grow, prices continue to increase, right? It's this mismatch between supply and demand. The more demand we have without enough supply to fill it, the higher prices go because we've got more competition for a limited scarce resource. So this is what we anticipate growth looking like potentially across Kalamazoo County if we continue the status quo. What you're seeing is all of the vacant residentially zoned land in Kalamazoo County. There is pressure on a lot of that property, but Kalamazoo County as a whole is averaging 1.7 acres per dwelling unit as a minimum requirement. Whereas in the city, what you're allowing for is a much greater diversity of housing typology, housing price point, and optionality for families of all sizes and wages. And so we really want to help to support what you've already done as a commission, what you've already done as a community to allow for that greater diversity of housing supply. Because the housing that Kalamazoo County families can afford is actually very much different than what the majority of the county is planning for. Right? For the most part, when we plan for large lot, single family only, what we're doing is segmenting the population and saying, we're only allowing for housing that is the most expensive housing type on some of the most expensive land for the largest household types. Whereas what we really need is a diversity of housing stock for small families, for medium-sized families, for single adults, and for couples, because we have that significant variety of households across the community. The other really important factor that we're finding not only in Kalamazoo County, but across the state of Michigan, the National Association of Realtors does a poll every year, and what they found is more than half of all households are asking for walkable, amenity-rich neighborhoods. When given the choice, they're willing to sacrifice square footage and private yards in order to get more proximity to local amenities. If they can walk to their favorite restaurant or their favorite coffee shop or their favorite bookstore or the library, or their kids can walk to school, they're putting more value on that walkable amenity than they are on an extra 400 square feet, generally speaking. So half of all households want that. But what we've found is roughly only about 9% of all residents actually live in a neighborhood where they can have that walkable, amenity-rich neighborhood. So again, we have a mismatch. If half of households want it, but only 9% of residents actually have it, there's more demand than there is supply. And so part of what we want to be thinking about is, how do we create more neighborhoods that have those opportunities for small business and entrepreneurship? More neighborhoods that allow for that optionality. So if you want to own a single family house, that's fantastic, and we want those options to be available. Or if you want to own a small condo or a flat in a missing middle complex, or if you want to rent something in a neighborhood with a great school, all of those options should be available. And so how do we do that? How do we create housing at all price points? And what would our communities be like if we were actually offering the types of choices that different households are asking for? So the first thing to acknowledge is that we have a very different demographic makeup of households than we did 40 years ago. Broadly, most zoning in Kalamazoo County is still zoning for the 1980s. Whereas in the 21st century, and especially since 2020, what we're seeing is almost 2/3 of all households are either single adults with no kids at home or couples with no kids at home. Now, whether or not we want this to continue to be the trend going forward, it's the current demographic reality. And yet, when we require everybody to own a single family house and to make that the only option for home ownership, what we're doing is leaving out 2/3 of the market unless they want to own more home than they're ready to take on. And that comes with additional responsibility for maintenance, for yard care, for snow plowing, all of the things that some households are happy to take on. Other households would prefer to defer that maintenance to another entity. Now, the last thing that's important leading up to how we think about corridors is, what does the infrastructure cost us, and how do we pay for it over time? So we spent a lot of time talking to the Kalamazoo County Road Commission as well as the City of Kalamazoo engineering staff to really understand, what does infrastructure cost us to build and what does it cost us to maintain? And what we found is it's roughly $120,000 per 78 feet of infrastructure when we're factoring in sewer, water, and road. And so every time we build a new subdivision, what we're requiring is, for every 78 feet of road, there is a minimum cost of $120,000 just for infrastructure. That's before we pay for the land, it's before we pour the foundation, it's before we even build the house. And so if only the infrastructure costs $120,000, then once we build the house, you can see how we're getting to a minimum home price of $350,000 or $400,000 typically when we're building new subdivisions. Meanwhile, when we have existing infrastructure, the same math applies. We still have all of the maintenance obligations for every foot of sewer, water, and road. And when we put one single family home on 75 feet to 100 feet of frontage, what we get is less tax revenue per front foot than if we were allowing 2 or 3 or 4 homes on that same infrastructure frontage. Even when 2 or 3 or 4 homes produces less revenue per home, it's more revenue per front foot of infrastructure. And so that's the important thing that we want you all to be thinking about. And oftentimes what we'll then hear from a local community is, well, yeah, but the cost of delivering other services gets more expensive when we have more people per front foot of infrastructure. And there's actually been a lot of research to demonstrate that that's in fact not actually true. That more often than not, the more you're able to bring additional residents into the community, the more they're able to share the cost for services like libraries and snow plowing and good education. All of those things tend to get better when we have more people and more neighbors. So really quickly, when we think about taxable value on a per acre basis, what we want to be doing is thinking about, how do we generate as much revenue as is possible to support all of the services that the community is asking for, while also providing for optionality and affordability. These two things actually go hand in hand. The more revenue we create, the more affordable we can make housing for families that need it. And so you can see we've got an image on the left of downtown Kalamazoo, an image on the right of a suburban neighborhood that will remain unnamed in Kalamazoo County. They're roughly the same acreage. In fact, the suburban lot is a little bit bigger than the downtown lot. And yet, the downtown lot is generating 10 times the economic revenue of the suburban lot. Generally, it's got roughly a similar amount of infrastructure, but it's producing vastly more tax revenue because of the development pattern that's being allowed on the downtown lot as compared to the suburban lot. And so what we want to do is think about how do we create more of those opportunities to generate revenue on the infrastructure that we have so that we can leverage that revenue to provide the amenities and services that the community is asking for. So this is a map of all of Kalamazoo County that illustrates tax revenue on a per acre basis. You can see that big purple spike. Those aren't skyscrapers in downtown Kalamazoo, that's tax revenue. And so downtown Kalamazoo is generating vastly more tax revenue on a per acre basis than any place else in Kalamazoo County. And it doesn't mean that we need to replicate downtown in other neighborhoods. This is a model that is representative of how we get more revenue per acre and per front foot of infrastructure so that we can provide more amenities and services to the community. But revenue is not the only goal here, it's just one. We also want to make sure that we're putting people first, that we're creating safe streets so that people can move around regardless of their ability or their age. I've got 2 young kids who don't have driver's licenses. The more freedom we can give them to move around so that mom and I don't have to drive them around, the more freedom it gives us to do the things we need to do. I've also got 2 parents that are into their 80s and likely won't be driving for the next 10 or 15 years. But they're still pretty active and mobile, and the more they're able to do things in their neighborhood without having to drive a car everywhere, the more agency that they have into their older age. The other thing that we want to do is integrate large shared green spaces as well as small private gardens, and creating more small lots is more cost effective than having big lots with lots of infrastructure. And then lastly, the thing that I think is really important to stress is we don't ever advocate for density for the sake of density. We always advocate it in proximity to those local amenities that people really want to be near to. We saw a lot of instances in the 60s and 70s where we created pockets of density on the outskirts of town in isolation from jobs and grocery stores and economic opportunity, and it didn't work well. What works really well is when we allow for people to live close together, close to the amenities that they're really excited to be near to. And that includes grocery stores, it includes cafes and restaurants, it includes schools, and it includes civic engagement opportunities to be a part of a community. All right, so I wanted to get through all of that to set the stage for what is the work that we actually did, and for you to kind of understand why are we exploring some of this work. Part of the point is nobody likes places like this, right? They often serve a purpose. There are stores in these places that we often want to go to, but I don't know anybody that is excited to be in this kind of an environment. And so the question is, how do we get some of that retail revenue without creating environments that look like this? And so we identified a number of corridors in the city of Kalamazoo, as well as the broader Kalamazoo County, that we felt like had much more asphalt than was necessary. They essentially built for Black Friday in 2002, but it's now 2026, and I think the last estimate was 42% of Christmas shopping happened online this year. We don't need all of that surface parking anymore for Black Friday sales. We can start putting it to better use. So these are all the corridors that we identified in Kalamazoo County. These are all of the corridors that we identified in the city of Kalamazoo. This was in partnership with staff, thinking about where do we already have sewer and water and a fair amount of either vacant or underutilized land, as well as access to public transportation and access to local amenities. And so the question is, what do streets have to do with housing? How did we get to this corridor idea when what we really want to do is talk about housing? Well, this is an image from GM's Futurama in 1939. This was the World's Fair. And what we thought at the time was, if we give everybody a car and we build an environment that allows them to drive that car everywhere, we're going to create a whole lot of economic mobility. But what we actually did is we created an environment where people are spending somewhere between 20 and 25% of their monthly budget on transportation. Depending on how many adults in the household own the car, we're typically spending between $8,000 and $12,000 per adult to get around the community. And this is going to take decades to transition And I think for a long time, we're going to continue to own cars and get around our communities primarily by car. But the more we're able to allow adults, especially young adults and older adults, to move around their neighborhoods without having to own a vehicle, we may all choose to own a vehicle, but if we have the ability to say, you know what, this year we're going to try to save money and we're going to go down to a one-car household, that extra $8,000 to $10,000 in the pocket of a household that's earning $40,000 or $50,000 a year is a monumental shift in what they're able to afford in terms of housing. And so when we're able to shift some of our household budget towards housing and away from transportation, it creates really significant opportunities for local households. But it means we have to create places and public infrastructure that asks you, that invites you, that welcomes you into that public space as a human being, not just as a driver. And so we're still going to continue to accommodate drivers, but we also want to be accommodating individuals who are outside of a car. They might be on a bike or on a scooter or on their own 2 feet. And so we want to segment between places that we are intending to drive through, and we're going to continue to need to have those places, and places that we want to be. And if it's a place we want to be able to slow down cars so that it feels comfortable having our kids walking alongside of us or biking alongside of us, and it feels comfortable getting somebody in their 60s or 70s or 80s or 90s out of a car and walking around the neighborhood feeling safe. And so this is the difference between those two environments. Now, neighborhood typologies. So I want to talk just a second about this, and then we'll show you how we're planning for those neighborhood typologies. Make sure I'm okay on time. In some places, we're going to call for the opportunity to build town centers. These could be 3, 4, 5, 6-story buildings close together, preferably with immediate proximity to transit stops. This will allow for sometimes mixed use on the ground floor and residential above. Village residential is that more kind of Main Street style environment, small town Michigan, 2- and 3-story buildings, sometimes retail on the ground floor, sometimes just multifamily. You may have townhouses or row houses in the adjacent blocks. These are classic neighborhoods that are all over in main streets across Michigan. Missing middle housing typologies. These are really important in the in-between spaces. So it might be duplexes, it might be townhomes, it might be fourplexes. And then lastly, small lot single family. So single family home ownership is still a bedrock of the American economy. It's still a really important opportunity for wealth generation. But when we require really large single family lots and homes, those are unnecessarily expensive, and we're boxing out big portions of the community. The more we're able to subdivide existing lots to allow a second single family house on what was once just one single family home, the more we're creating opportunities for home ownership and wealth creation. And so I'm sure you've all seen this graphic before. It's providing for those middle opportunities. We do a really good job of creating opportunity for single family home ownership, and we've done an okay job of providing lots of kind of big, complex multifamily. We haven't done a great job of serving all of those needs in the middle. All right, so when we mapped the city of Kalamazoo, what we found was you've got roughly 2,400 acres on a handful of corridors that could be redeveloped or developed for the first time into some form of housing. Could be multifamily, it could be single family, it could be something in between. And what we've done is thought about, now for vacant only, right? So what we did is we thought about what is vacant and what is underutilized. An underutilized property is, you might have a strip mall with 2 acres of parking. It might only need 1 acre of parking. So that extra acre could be utilized for something else, could be utilized for families who want to live there. When we just look at vacant parcels, we still have 765 acres. So if we were to discount all of those parking lots and we just looked at property that hasn't been developed yet, there's almost 800 acres of available land across the city in a total of 1,600 parcels. So then if you remember those neighborhood centers that I outlined, there's roughly 472 acres available in those neighborhood centers that we're showing here. The village centers could be up to 200 acres of potential property. On corridor, if you can see, it's that sort of slightly orange color, roughly 15 acres that might be good for missing middle housing typologies. And then another 250 acres that could be great for that small lot single family. So now, as Sherilyn mentioned, we created a couple of example transformations. These are not actual proposals, they're just examples. Happy to answer questions about these. This first one is the corner of Lovers Lane and East Cork. And the point of this exercise is to show you what happens in terms of our opportunity to create more housing, as well as to create more revenue for the community, and to create a sense of place that creates opportunity for entrepreneurship and small business ownership. So what we currently have at Lovers Lane and Cork is 5.5 acres of land, 0 existing households, and about $750,000 in taxable value. And what we've created is an opportunity to create roughly 97 additional households in a mix of single-family townhouse ownership, condominium ownership, and multifamily rental above retail. We maintained the existing church there, but we created a bunch of additional opportunities around it. And this would generate about $18 million in new tax revenue above and beyond what's currently there. And so again, if you compare what's currently there to what could be there, then we can sort of look at that revenue taxable value jumps. The county tax goes up from $6,900 to $166,000. The city's tax jumps from $14,000 to $355,000. One of the things a metric that we didn't put here is new students in public schools. When we create 97 new households, chances are about 20% of those households are going to have 1 or more kids in the home. And so we'd have roughly 20 new kids in Kalamazoo Public Schools contributing to revenue for the school district as well. And then that last line item, what you see is the existing scenario is creating 72% of the revenue that's necessary to pay for the public infrastructure that serves it. The new proposal would create 2,700% of the revenue necessary to pay for the infrastructure that serves it. So vastly improved economic reality. Next one is the corner of Cork and Westnedge. Again, this is just an example. What we hope is we're going to inspire some property owners to ask some questions and say, hey, how might we actually do this? So we took a 4-acre parcel with 0 existing households and $868,000 in current tax revenue. And we're illustrating something that, again, includes opportunity for small business and entrepreneurship, 85 new households, and $13 million in new tax revenue. And again, we've created this table of comparisons so that you can see status quo compared to what could we create if we supported a new neighborhood like this. One of the things I want to stress here is Sherilyn has talked previously, and I think we'll talk again later, about the toolbox that the city has available to it, some of the economic development tools, whether it's the neighborhood enterprise zone, the low-income housing tax credit, brownfield TIF. All of those things will be necessary to catalyze the first phase of development, sometimes the first couple of phases. But the idea is what we want to be able to do over time is generate new investment early, spark the market, secure a certain amount of affordability, and then over time allow the market to take over, assuming that we've preserved enough land to ensure we're getting 15, 20, 25% affordability over time. The last one is the corner of Patterson and Douglas. You can see 4.5 acres, 0 existing households. Taxable value here should actually be 0. This is owned by a church, so we're going to correct that before we give you the final copy. So there's currently 0 taxable value. And what we show is a more modest kind of single-family neighborhood with a handful of missing middle housing typologies. We put a 6-plex on the corner there. A couple of small plexes on the interior. We created room for 55 new households and $11 million in new taxable value. And again, left quite a bit of parking there for the church. We know that on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings, there's going to be a need for some of that parking, but probably not nearly as much as there has been over time. So now the 6 key takeaways before I wrap up. What we want to ensure is that we're creating and designing walkable streetscapes that allow these neighborhoods to thrive. They become places to be, not just places to drive through. We want to allow for soft density and great streets. These are the kinds of places that people tend to linger longer and spend more at local retail. When you think about those national chain retailers, what they care most about is how many cars go speeding by, because they got the big sign out front and they want you to pull into the drive-through. What we want is for local business owners to encourage people to stop, hang out on a park bench, come in, do some shopping, have dinner, get a cup of coffee. That's how local businesses make money. We want to pair those walkable streets with amenities as well as higher density housing, and we want to create these amenities for all ages. It creates much more mobility. We want to recognize that every time we add a new traffic lane, what we're doing is encouraging more cars to take that route because we're making it faster for people to get through those places. Very quickly, when we add an extra lane of traffic, that extra lane gets absorbed because people realize, oh, this is now the fastest way. It attracts more traffic. We call it induced demand. Surface parking lots tend to consume a lot of land, and in high demand areas, we could be using that land for other things. It doesn't mean we don't need to park cars. It just means there are constantly trade-offs between parking cars and creating places for housing. And lastly, when we design for mobility choices, we allow households to free up some of their economic expenditure for housing or retirement or college savings or any of those other things. And so what we want to acknowledge is that infrastructure invites behavior. The investments in public infrastructure are communicating to the community, what do we want you to do here? Do we want you to drive fast or do we want you to walk slow? Do we want you to spend money with local business or do we want you to take it to a national retailer? Do we want your kids to feel safe or do we want them to feel like they've got to be buckled up and strapped in? So to move forward, what we really want is for the local community to recognize that this is a plan that the neighborhood should be enacting. And so the opportunity for them is to pick a place, to pick a site, and work together and strategically to create opportunities for economic development. One of the things I want to highlight real quick in these plans is all of the plans that we created were designed for small scale and emerging developers to be part of the mix. So we didn't create buildings that are all those big full-length block where it's one monotonous building that requires an outside developer to bring $50 million of capital in order for it to work. Notice that we have a traditional Main Street style of development that allows a small-scale developer to do one project at a time that might be 6 units or 8 units. They could even do a duplex. We built in opportunities for small-scale and emerging developers to have a piece of every one of these types of projects. And again, these are just examples, but we believe that momentum is contagious. And so what we want is to demonstrate the economic viability of these types of projects. We want to celebrate the small-scale successes and encourage the local community members to participate in the growth of their own neighborhoods, not to say, great, we created this good, nice plan that somebody else is going to come in and do and extract wealth from the neighborhood and take it out to the suburbs or take it to New Jersey or New York or wherever their capital comes from. We want that capital to come from here and to stay here. And we've designed these investments for the long term. So in a lot of instances, what we're going to need is to think about that economic development toolkit, the toolbox that Sherilyn spoke of, as well as impact investment to ensure that we're catalyzing those first scale developments early, that they make economic sense, but those first ones aren't going to make anybody a ton of money in the first 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's as we build out these neighborhoods over the long term that they really start to create generational wealth, and we want to create opportunities for neighbors in these communities. And so what we encourage is that we start small, we pick one place, we do that one place really well, it shows the community what's possible, and it encourages people to keep going. And all throughout that process, we encourage that the community continues to communicate. How did we get here? What's been done? What's next? And how do you get involved? This iterative feedback loop that generates a flywheel for the community. And so as a follow-up to this, we'll create a communications plan that staff can use to continue to articulate that message. But we really want to see one block at a time, economic growth, housing choice and diversity, and economic mobility for the whole community. So I think I went a little over time, but hopefully there's still some time for y'all to ask me questions, and we can still make some minor revisions to this before it's finalized.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you so much for being here, Ryan. This looks exciting. I do have 2 questions. The first being, as we're spurring development specifically around our core neighborhoods, what are we creating to provide financial assistance to the increasing property taxes that our long-term homeowners have been keeping our communities together? What are we creating and how are we doing that within this plan? And then my second question is around incorporating climate and environmental justice into this work in that plan as well. What are we doing to really spur that and say, if you're developing here, this is what we need to get our homes and our properties climate ready for the future?
Yeah, great questions. Love those questions. So the first one, in terms of property taxes for long-established homeowners, their property taxes are capped by the Headley Amendment. They don't increase by more than 2% or 3% per year. Even as the growth in wealth in the neighborhood continues to grow, their property taxes do not grow any faster than inflation. Now, there are opportunities to offset property taxes. When an existing homeowner wants to make significant rehab, the neighborhood enterprise zone is an opportunity to offset new tax increases, and that's already in the city's economic development toolbox. And when a neighbor says, I want to make an investment in a piece of property that I already own, they want to build something new, the taxes are going to go up. You all have the ability to consider some of those tools in the toolbox, like brownfield TIF or the neighborhood enterprise zone. There are a number of resources that you can use to offset their property taxes. And lastly, there is a provision for low-income households to request a property tax abatement if they qualify, even if they're not pursuing something like a neighborhood enterprise zone. So generally, I hope that that's not a big problem for the community because we have existing legislation in place. As for climate action, one of the things that the LEED Corporation has done is identified LEED for neighborhood development as one of the most sustainable ways to get LEED certified. And what that means is when we build in compact ways that allow for people to share walls, what we're doing is reducing their heating cost, which reduces their carbon footprint. We also allow them to move around without needing to get in a car, which also reduces their carbon footprint. So one of the most environmentally sustainable ways to build is to build in compact ways. But the other thing that you all can do is to think about incentives to require an additional level of LEED certification or to require an additional level of environmental sustainability when new construction happens. The existing building code is already pretty good compared to what we were building in the 90s and prior. New construction is actually very efficient. But you can require additional environmental sustainability above and beyond the existing building code if you wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you for that, because I know in my neighborhood, I live on the north side of Kalamazoo, and my property taxes have increased twice within 1 year. And so when you say that, for a layman person like myself, 2%, that could be a nice little chunk of money for a low income to moderate income household. So I really wanted to lift that up today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's just a few moments till 7 when our business meeting starts. I want to give everybody a break here. Is that, oh, no, it's 6. Good, I'm an hour ahead of time, so we can ask all the questions we want. Other questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Slaby.
I actually want to follow up on Commissioner Hoffman's first question. So you mentioned about the tax being capped for existing homeowners. But one of the things that we think about in our core neighborhoods is often these are one of the only assets that people have to build wealth. And so that usually looks like people being able to pass their house down to their children or another family member. Outside of some very specific exemptions in Michigan, if there's a transfer upon death, it does get uncapped. And so it's not around just simply keeping that person that ages in place in because their property value doesn't necessarily go up significantly. It's to allow that to stay within the family instead of upon death or for whatever reason, financial issues, they have to transfer ownership, that person in that family can still maintain that home for generations to come. And I think that's one of the things that we don't really think about, but one of the bigger issues when we think about gentrification that does not get accounted for when we have these conversations.
Yes, I'm super glad you brought that up. So I think an opportunity for the city is to help existing homeowners understand the legal mechanisms to protect their homes from the tax increase when it's passed on to family. And I think one of the best mechanisms is to place the house in a trust, and it would be in a living trust. And when you do that, it protects the home. It essentially, if the existing homeowner passes away and the trust gets passed to the next generation, it's still owned by the trust. And so there is no change of ownership and taxes don't go up beyond the annual rate of inflation. So that would require a legal firm to help the household. There might be a local nonprofit that could also facilitate that. But there are really good ways to do that so that we don't run into that situation.
Other questions, Commissioner?
Well, I was curious because you say we a lot and talk about this as projects, but we just heard from Sherilyn that this isn't necessarily something that the city is looking to do or lead. So exactly what's the idea as next steps? Who's leading what?
Yeah, that's entirely up to you, right? So this is a study that outlines where the opportunities are, and I think it's up to the city of Kalamazoo, you all as decision makers, to decide, do you want to do anything with the study? Are there any locations where you'd like to take action? Do you want to use it as a reference? I think it's going to be incorporated into the master plan as a reference tool. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, there isn't any plan to execute on anything in the plan right now.
Could you talk more about the need for options for seniors? I know that they're part of, particularly maybe the individual households living alone.
Yep.
But we think about over the next 10 years, there's been claims across the state that we'll need to build a range of options from hospice to accessory dwelling units. Time and time again, surveys come out to say that older people actually prefer to age in place or age with loved ones. And I didn't really see a lot of that necessarily considered across these options, or even considerations around based on lot sizes, what's possible for ADUs. I know our zoning already kind of allows that for a lot of our properties already, but just considering the number of people we're looking to be housed over the next 5+ years and what incentives might be out there to support that type of living situation.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that many individuals prefer to age in place, and thinking about how do we encourage that and support it when it works for the individual. And that really depends on their mobility and the layout of the house, right? Because if all the bedrooms are upstairs and even sometimes the bathroom is upstairs, sometimes we've got to figure out new improvements to the home. And sometimes that accessory dwelling unit in the backyard becomes the perfect opportunity for them to move into so that they can then rent out the primary home and generate revenue. And so the question is, how do we help them finance that, right? And again, when I say we, it's the royal we, it's not me. But the idea there is if they want to stay on their property and in their neighborhood because they have social capital that's been built up over generations in the community, allowing them to create an ADU and helping them to finance it. If they own their home outright, they've probably got a fair amount of equity that can be leveraged to build the ADU. And then being able to rent out the primary home as an opportunity to pay down a home equity line of credit or something like that. So it's sometimes complicated, sometimes simple. It depends on the family structure and the household finances. But the other end of your question, I think, is for individuals who need to move into a new retirement facility, it's creating those opportunities. And I think, frankly, the corridors are some of the best places for new senior-oriented housing, because oftentimes what you want is a building with an elevator. And in order to justify the cost of an elevator, we typically need to build 30 or 40 or 50 units at a time. And finding land that can accommodate a 50-unit senior-oriented housing facility, typically we're going to need an acre or so. And what we've identified is all of the properties along those corridors that could be great opportunities for that. But what we don't want is to put seniors in places that aren't a neighborhood, right? Just like relegate them to some commercial corridor that's not very nice. We want to make those corridors into great places where they can still be interactive with the community and still be part of the growth and the vibrancy of a sense of place.
This is my last question. Thinking about mixed use and how we're moving towards doing that to be able to re-densify urban core, particularly in Kalamazoo, but maybe this is not unique to our area. I've noticed that across different types of arrangements of mixed use, we're struggling a bit to actually lease the commercial part of it.
Yep.
And that leads to ongoing long-term deferred maintenance about residential, because obviously they can't really afford it anymore, or change in ownership to out-of-state commercial brokers, which creates a host of problems. I think about some of these examples you showed, and they're pretty multifaceted. So I think about how do we actually accomplish that, whether it's multiple developers coming together to phase out piecemeal, or are we talking about like plan unit development style? And so I'm just curious exactly the implementation in some of these examples. Like, how do we think through long-term support of this? Because like we say we want walkable, like we as Royal Reed, like everybody out here says we want it, but then it doesn't work. in terms of just like when we're first starting out.
Yes.
And being able to show people that it does work. And so we're missing some special ingredients here. And so I'm just thinking about how does that play a role in this housing corridor study?
Yeah, I have an answer, but I think Sherilyn is here with something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say again, this is the housing corridor opportunity or study. So it's, if you pull it more to the macro level of thinking about the corridors within the city that already has the infrastructure there. So in trying to think about what's not working in development, one of the things that's not working is it costs too much. It costs too much to develop. We don't have rents that ultimately support the cost to develop. So what are ways that the city can come in and help to reduce the cost? Well, one of the ways that could help is pointing out opportunities like this. We have underutilized land within the city that already has the infrastructure. So it wouldn't require a developer to build a new street. It wouldn't require a developer to pay for new lines and to pay for the infrastructure it takes, which, as was pointed out, $120,000 per 76 feet. And so you think about our developments of even just 14 and 16 units. That's a lot of change for infrastructure alone. And so that's one of the things that is not working. So if we look at a strategy like this to really become sort of that visual tool to our development community to say, is there a different way, a more affordable way that I can build? So the city in the toolbox does have tools that we can use, different abatement strategies that are offered. But this is just another tool to say, look at these corridors, see if there's a way you can develop on. They're already on bus lines, they're already placed within businesses that are thriving or not vacant businesses. So, like you take the one corridor, there's a grocery store already there. The grocery store could still stay intact. The infrastructure's there, the school is there, the sidewalks are already there. So if we think about and kind of pull out to the whatever the saying is, the 1,000-foot view or whatever, this is to say, look at these corridors and see where opportunities are, where it could save money on development cost. I just wanted to point that out before we got into all the types.
Yeah. So you have unanswered questions yet. Mr. Mayor, are we okay on time for me?
We're fine. I was off by an hour. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I know, but you all do deserve a break before 7. You asked about retail, which is a really important question.
Or commercial in general.
Yeah, commercial in general, thank you, yes. So there was a period there, kind of early 2000s through COVID, frankly, where a lot of us planners were saying, oh, all of these mixed-use buildings should have commercial on the ground floor because it makes it more walkable. But over that period of time, as I mentioned earlier, we had a lot more e-commerce happening. And then during COVID, we lost a lot of viable restaurants. And so for these kinds of places, and I think you were kind of alluding to this point just a minute ago, we want to start to build momentum and density in a neighborhood before we start requiring commercial on the ground floor. And so that might mean that some of that ground floor frontage is going to be residential. That might mean that some of that ground floor frontage could be live-work in the instances where that works. Making it active and pedestrian-friendly is still important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be commercial. The other thing that I think is really important is we often build retail in our sort of 1990s or early 2000s perspective where every retail bay is 2,000 or 4,000 square feet. What we're finding is a lot of local entrepreneurs need to be able to start in 400 square feet, sometimes smaller than that, right? They need sort of a pop-up space to test the market and find out, is the thing that I'm making or producing what the market actually wants? And can I pay as little rent as possible while I figure that out? And so creating more of those incubator spaces is really important, and thinking about how do we work with our small business incubators in the community to both generate those kinds of spaces and catalyze entrepreneurs in some of the places that we're building.
I just want to follow up on this, is that I think this is great. I think I still feel like we do this every 5 years, and we talk about these opportunities to do major transformations. Sometimes it works, like sometimes actually somebody does that. Sometimes it's still vacant for another 10 years. And that's because we've just, even between us and maybe just Hoffman brings some stuff up, there's like so much complex stuff that isn't even part of the original development of this housing that needs to go into wraparound services, programming, communications to actually make it work. And so I think beyond just looking at it at a 1,000-foot level, my most concern is I didn't ask anything about how we get it developed necessarily. I'm thinking more so once we do have it developed, once we give all these developers all these abatements and opportunities, incentives to actually do it, how do we define the success of it over long term? And I can name several things right outside this window that have increased 89 residential units. Still can't rent out the commercial. Still increase 100 units over there, still can't rent out commercial. We have a low rise in the Stewart neighborhood, still can't rent out the commercial. And that again adds to deferred maintenance over time for the portfolio, and also sends a message for people in these walkable areas, what's going on, because this is vacant, right? And so I just think that there's more discussion I'm looking forward to having, but I feel like this is something that is presented to communities every 5 to 10 years, and then that's that. So.
That's great. I appreciate that. We do have a retail expert on our team and would love to work more with the city to figure out how do we fill those commercial spaces, but how do we also finance them so that the developer or owner is able to take a discount on rent and it doesn't mess with their loan. Because oftentimes what we see right now is the underwriting is based on a particular dollar per square foot. And when the developer can't get that dollar per square foot, it puts their loan in jeopardy. And so it's actually better for the loan to leave it vacant, believe it or not. So there are ways to finance development that we don't run into those situations. But it gets a little more nuanced and detailed than we're probably ready to get into today, but would love to continue that conversation at some point.
Thank you, Ryan. Other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Pradel?
Ryan, thanks for being here. I subscribed to your newsletter and recently subscribed to your Substack, and really appreciate the different topics you write on, and just your thought process with those. So one thing that's kind of unique about Kalamazoo is we have a Housing for All millage. You know, we're one of, are we still just one of 83 counties that has our own housing millage, or has that changed? Either way, very few.
Yeah.
And we have a Foundation for Excellence. Recently had a Keys to Kalamazoo initiative announced with the county. So it's really impressive that we have these funding tools available to help support a lot of these visions that we have for the future with our community. Nonetheless, I was just curious, aside from those opportunities that we have here locally, what trends are you seeing in terms of like special financing or funding techniques that developers are using that are particularly effective specifically for these type of like transformational corridor examples like those 3 that you gave? You know, what are the things that you're seeing are working or really spurring those folks to gain interest and traction in that kind of development?
Yeah. So I think your pre-approved plans are going to be really important. I think on the early end, bringing in emerging developers to think about how do we get them engaged. Sometimes as the market shifts, you can gain or lose a 50-unit development overnight because interest went up by a half point, right? But smaller scale developers are much more resilient to those subtle shifts in the market. Because they're only going to build 6 units, they have a lot more confidence that they can move forward, even when there's a softening in the market. And so creating those spaces for small scale developers is really important, and setting aside a couple of places where you say, you know what, we really still want a larger development in this location. But then the big one is thinking about how we leverage impact capital in these kinds of spaces. For the last 15 years or so, real estate has become very much commoditized. It's become financialized in a way that most developers are trying to build and sell within 5 years. And that doesn't work with these kinds of transformations. You're not going to earn the kind of return on investment that the traditional kind of for-profit developer who just wants to come in, create a bunch of wealth, and then extract it. That doesn't happen in this situation. What we need is investors who are willing to invest for 10 or 15 years, who want to see the long-term growth of the neighborhood and are willing to put in impact capital that doesn't see a significant return in early years, but does see a substantial return over the long run. And ideally, what we're doing is then marrying that impact capital with emerging developers and small-scale developers, as well as an entrepreneurial ecosystem that supports small business. And I think to the earlier point, that gets complicated, right? And so having somebody who's able to quarterback all three of those things at the same time is really the key, is having a partner that's able to think about all three of those facets, braid them together to make sure that the project works for the long term.
Good example. Tonight we have the Beyond Burdick development that's on the corner of Vine and Burdick. And I think that's an example of where Sherilyn, I think, talks a lot about this, about like the financing lasagna, if you will.
Yep.
I mean, do you think in terms of this kind of a transformational corridor, those three examples, I mean, is it fair to say that like there really is no way around besides this like really creative, innovative lasagna of financing to make those possible?
In the short term, yes, right? Like I think we're at a point where cost of construction, cost of financing are just above what a majority of households can afford and above what a lot of business owners can afford. And so if we're building something new, we have to acknowledge it's more expensive than the market is ready to bear. And so bringing in this creative capital stack is necessary to get it out of the ground. I think the goal from my perspective would be to create a neighborhood that begins to generate its own momentum so that there's enough demand and desire for people to be in there that are willing to spend a market rate rent so that we don't have to subsidize everything into the future. We're only subsidizing what is necessary for our low and moderate income households. I think we've gotten ourselves into a situation right now where everything needs a subsidy, right? It all needs a tax break. And it's true in Grand Rapids too. I think it's true in Ann Arbor and Traverse City. It's a frustrating moment to be in. What we want to do is drive growth to the point that a market rate will handle itself, and we only need to subsidize what's affordable to low and moderate income households.
And quite a few examples, I guess, over the last few years. I think the last count was, what, $35 million in housing. I think in the last 5 years, a lot of that's probably been driven by ARPA,
Yep.
Foundation for Excellence, whatnot as well. However, like if a commission like us has a lot of competing priorities and has just a finite limited amount that we can devote to things, what are you seeing as the most impactful, like greatest bang for the buck, I guess, if you will, in terms of a developer looking at it and saying, wow, that was the game changer for me to turn the green light from a yellow light or a red light in the progress of developing. And I guess when I ask that question, beyond just the typical tax abatements.
Yeah. The big one is actually one that city staff are already aligned with, which is when the city is going to make investments in infrastructure, to align those investments with the private capital that you want to see, right? So there were a couple of sites that we had talked about potentially creating a sample rendering for, and staff said, we're actually too far away from being able to make the necessary public infrastructure improvements to get people overly excited about this spot yet, right? Because you have a capital improvement plan, you know when those infrastructure investments are going to happen. If the city's making investments to plant street trees, to build rain gardens, to add bike lanes, all of those things add economic value, and they signal to the market that this is a place worth investing. And so the more you can leverage those infrastructure improvements while trying to bring in developers, both local and kind of more broadly regional, simultaneously, and you try to maintain that momentum over time, right? The other kind of mistake that some communities make is, oh yeah, we're going to incentivize everything no matter where it is in the city. You end up with these little sort of popcorn ideas that pop up all over the place, but none of them get enough legs to really be self-sustaining. Everything continues to need a subsidy. And so what you want to do is try to incubate one place, invest in the infrastructure, invest in the tax incentives, try to get small-scale developers happening in that place. Once the market starts to understand it, you give it one last push, and then you're ready to go move on to another location.
We had another example here recently. We had, I think it was almost $100 million of transformational work on 3 projects, basically. And one of the projects is actually a former commercial office space being converted into more of a residential. Okay. And you heard about like the trend from the pandemic where people were moving out of offices, and so now a lot of office space is sitting vacant in a lot of places. So now a lot of communities, especially urban communities, are shifting those to more residential areas. I guess my question is what are your thoughts about that? And do you think that's wise investment? Do you think that trend has some staying power? Do you think there's any possibility of that trend reversing at some point, and then kind of regretting shifting to residential from commercial? I just was curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so office to residential conversion is a tricky one. A lot of office buildings were built with a big floor plate and only restrooms and plumbing in the core of the building. And so in those instances, you need the value of the land and the existing building to be low enough that you can justify making big investments in mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, because every new unit that you build inside of that office building is going to need a bathroom and a kitchen. Right? And so you're going to run a lot of MEPs through the building, and that gets expensive. But if the floor to ceiling height is good and you've got lots of natural light, then it might be able to work. But I think there is somewhat of a risk of going too far towards residential and away from office. Right now, there's still a lot of absorption that needs to happen because we had lots of Class B product that's been vacated since the pandemic, and people just aren't coming back into it. And so thinking about how do we reuse that Class B product is really important. When it's easy to convert for residential, I think it's worthwhile doing. But there are going to be buildings that are too hard to convert. And then I think the question is, do we tear them down, or do we work really hard to try to get new office users in? And what's interesting at this particular moment is we're seeing more and more corporations trying to bring employees back in because it's better for their corporate culture when people are together, as opposed to constantly on Zoom. But we've also now built an expectation where, myself included, many of us like to work from home a couple days a week. And so how do you justify a 30-day-a-month lease, right? We're leasing this property every single day of the week, but people are only coming in for 3 of the 7 days, right? And so it's getting creative about how we use the space. It's getting some office users to collaborate around office space. I think over the next 5 years, there's going to be a transformation in how we office together. And I would hazard to predict exactly how that's all going to play out.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Leslie, this is more of a comment, but I really appreciate you helping to envision those different corridors. With the example in Patterson and Douglas, and just looking at that massive lot in front of the church. I mean, certainly, like you said, these are hypothetical scenarios, but it really helps you to have that conversation with neighborhoods and with community to say, this is possible. Let us show you how that could be possible, even if it doesn't necessarily happen in that spot. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Hess.
Sure. Thank you for being here, Ryan. So aside from, Sherilyn probably, or you may know about the Stockbridge plan, about the lot there in Stockbridge. How is that going to be something that's a part of the corridor improvement project?
I think it's going to be part of the master plan, but not part of this particular study.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So on this study, there's just examples. So we didn't pick Stockbridge as an example, but it will be part of the master plan, but it's not in the study. The example that we picked are the 3 that we saw tonight, and I think you are still working on 1 or 2 smaller samples. Yeah.
Okay, but I had another question for you too. Like, so if this is a study that we did, and what is the timeline? Will there be implementation? I mean, it's not something that we would vote on, but I just wonder about the moving forward. And does the city have relationships with developers other than, I mean, the first person that comes to mind for me is Jamari Bogan, but like, do we have relationships, or how do we recruit those developers to be able to bring these things to fruition? I mean, I would love to see this thing happening tomorrow.
Yes, so the timeline is it would be part of the master plan, and so that's when it would actually sort of unroll out, but we will end up putting it on our website early before it comes out. We do have relationships with sort of, I can't remember the word that Ryan used, those anchor developers, the ones that have access to larger amounts of capital, 30, 40, 50 million. And then we have smaller developers who have been asking for opportunities and learning on how to do development. So, you know, you mentioned one developer, and Jamari's actually been doing some mentoring with some smaller developers. And then the city has also paid to have some people that are interested in development go through this real estate boot camp type of opportunity to get some of those emerging developers to come along. You know, Jay mentioned there's a lot of things that go into it. It is very complicated. It requires a great deal of tenacity and grit. And so we have people who are interested, but it becomes very consuming very quickly.
Do we have the capacity of the city to be able to deal with that consumption?
Would you rephrase that
Well,
question?
for
me?
development, like, do we have the capacity within our departments and personnel to be able to deal with that increased capacity?
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, no. The answer would be no, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So if the question is, do we have the capacity to consult emerging developers on all of the facets of being a developer? Right. No. We have to partner with places like LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation, CEDM. We've partnered with, I'm sorry, their name is escaping me right this second. Thank you. Incremental Development Alliance. So we do have to partner because that is a full-time
Right.
work. Yeah.
Right. Just
Yeah.
wondering.
That's because that's consultant work. That's really what it ends up being.
So as we decide that we're going to implement this and we move it out, do we, will the city be putting out like RFPs to these developers, or?
Yeah, so once again, with the samples that we're using, the city doesn't own any of the land. So for like Stockbridge, you mentioned Stockbridge, that would be an RFP project. That would be something where the city owns it, the city's looking for development to happen. There's probably some direction on what type of development the city will want to happen at Stockbridge. That would be RFP'd out. For this really is to get the community talking about. So one of the samples that we did is the corner of Douglas and Patterson. And so which a church owns that, and the church might have plans for that. They may know exactly what they're doing with all of that surface space. But if they don't, they might want to start conversations with, wow, we have this land and we would like to partner. We would like to be part of this solution. And so there could be the partnerships that start to happen. If the church were to reach out to the city could most definitely start directing conversations within the community as far as here's people to talk to get something like this started.
Thank you for that. I drive by there every day and just think, I see a wonderful development there. So,
And just as a reminder, this is one of many tools in our toolkit. And so the irony is one of the projects that's been mentioned, I came to staff with and I said, man, what do we have that could do this? Because this is a ripe location. And they flipped through the slides and they actually showed me the one that we were talking about just now. So this is kind of a vision. And so we're not going to have all the details about how it gets played out, but this is just giving you an idea of the many tools that you have as a commission to expect from this staff to bring forward to you. So I appreciate it, and I hope this is helpful for you.
Thank you. It was.
Thank you.
Commissioner Slaby.
I was just going back to the toolbox that you laid out in the presentation. And I think one thing that's not listed here is our TIF districts. You know, we have NCBDA, Northside Cultural Business District Authority. I think about what a wonderful opportunity for the city to actually fund NCBDA at a level in which they could support doing additional infrastructure improvements as Ryan mentioned, as a way to attract developers in that area. But I feel like we've struggled to get to that point where we could decide to actually provide that initial seed money for NCBDA. So I just think about, we have existing tools here that I feel are underutilized, particularly in our core neighborhoods like Northside, that have been asking for us to invest in that. And so I just wonder if that's another thing to reinforce this wonderful corridor study we received that actually calls out a space that I don't think is in the corridor authority specifically, but is in Northside and could again serve as a catalyst and spur investment within NCBDA within the boundaries, as we've seen some businesses within that boundary close lately with Elysium and Green Door Distillery now. So just, if anybody else is listening, I'd love to talk about funding for NCBDA in the future, sometime. Thank you.
But we could definitely look at updating our toolkit to reference TIF, because I think that's part of it anyway, so.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks. If there's a tool that fell down on a lower shelf, thanks for reminding me it's down there. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up and put it on there.
Thank you so much. Further questions, commissioners, at this time? All right, thank you, Manager, and thank you,
Thank you.
Sherilyn and Ryan. Appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
We are now on to the point of this agenda for commissioner comments. Just a reminder for all those that are watching, there will also be an opportunity for commissioner comments at our 7 o'clock business meeting, which hopefully will come before 2 a.m. tonight. Any commissioner comments for the good of the order here? All right, thank you so much. Then we will be seeing each other again in about a half an hour or so, and we are adjourned.